I'm about to do something that's going to make me lose my mind. Drive 500 laps around one track with a Formula 2 car. In this challenge, I'm going to go from having never driven a 2024 F2 car in the F1 game to getting into the top 5% in the world. Is this actually possible? Well, you're definitely going to see me go crazy a few times in this challenge because I've got absolutely no idea and this is going to take me weeks. So unsurprisingly, because I'd never driven a Formula 2 2024 car before, my first lap was a disaster. However, that was to be expected. But trust me, the amount of progress that I make in this video is something that you do not want to miss. So as you've just seen in the background, we've gone through this first lap very quickly and we're now coming up to the end of the lap, and in fairness, I hadn't invalidated just yet, which is a rarity for me in these 500 lap challenges. But sadly, as I went through the final corner on this lap, I had a 180-degree spin, which obviously cost me a lot of lap time. However, I did have 499 laps left to improve and I was already into the top 84% in the world. So of course, I'm not going to waste your time and we're going to go through the rest of this first stint pretty quickly, and on my second improvement, I was 1.5 seconds up to the delta coming into the final two corners. But sadly, I had another spin, although as we speed up to the end of the lap, even though I had a pretty poor run going through the final corner, I still made another massive chunk of progress. And not too long after this, I was about to make yet another improvement, and this would be my first lap where I didn't make any big proper mistake like a spin, and that was going to be reflected in the lap time that I gained. And the lack of mistakes on this lap led to me gaining a massive 5 seconds, and as we speed up going through the final corner, I found even more tenths, which gained me a huge amount in terms of the leaderboard. And as I said, I'm not going to waste your time with this stint, although I did make progress on another 2 laps in the first 50, which weren't worth as much in terms of lap time. But what they did do is gain me a massive 10% in terms of the leaderboard, and as we finish up this first 50 lap stint, I was now into the top 68% in the world. So my first improvement of my second stint came after 19 laps, and it was only a very minor lap time gain. However, I was not complaining. This is because starting stints with a positive bit of progress in this challenge is just so crucial, and I was ready to start making some big improvements. And only 9 laps later, I was coming into the second corner slightly up to the delta. Coming into this corner, I decided that I wasn't actually going to follow the racing line for once and try and focus on the exit, which would end up being a fantastic decision. This is because I managed to get brilliant traction leaving the corner, and by the time we reached the next braking zone, I was just over 2 tenths up. Next up was turn 6, and going through this corner, I absolutely nailed it. I cut it perfectly, and I was now over 4 tenths up. However, things were about to go slightly downhill. As we go through the long right-hander, I was just way too eager on the throttle, and I would have invalidated if I didn't brake on the exit. And then going through the chicane, I tried to make up for my error, which led to me having to back out of these 2 corners. However, I managed to somehow gain time going through here, as I was now half a second in the green. And I managed to make even more progress going through the next section of corners, and I left turn 10 just over 7 tenths up. And I maintained this until the end of the lap, and this huge gain put me all the way up into the top 56% in the world. And I was not done yet on this stint. We're coming into the chicane, and I was very confident that if I didn't avoid the corners this time, I would gain time. And that is exactly what happened. Fortunately for me, I actually had a very good run going through these 2 corners, which brought me to comfortably over 4 tenths up. And then going through the remainder of the corners in the second sector, I would maintain this improvement, and this could be absolutely massive for my progress in this challenge. Now it's time for the final 3 corners on this track. Through turn 14, I didn't exactly have a perfect run, but I still managed to gain time, and I was now half a second up. However, this is where it all went wrong. Coming into the final corner, I once again broke a little bit later and focused on getting a good exit. However, I had 2 massive snaps of oversteer on the exit, which left me under a 10th up coming into the final corner. And sadly, going through the final corner, I only managed to keep my improvement to 400ths in the green, which I maintained till the end of the lap. And here is my 100th lap of this challenge. Yet, to be honest, I was a little disappointed with my mistake on the exit of the penultimate corner. However, I knew that I could definitely make up for it. And if I did make up for it, I also knew that I was going to be comfortably in the top 50% in the world. So it actually took me a long time to set an improvement on my third 50 lap stint, but trust me, it was worth the wait. Coming into the first corner on lap 142, I was aware that there was time to find, and I absolutely nailed this corner. I now want to take you through the whole of this lap just so you get an idea of how I was driving at this point in the challenge. So as you can see, this lap was not perfect. However, I was maintaining the gain that I made in the first corner, and we all know that if I don't make a mistake in the penultimate corner, I can set a huge improvement here. First up though was the third from last corner, and I hit the apex exactly how I wanted to, which brought me to almost half a second positive coming into this vital corner. And it's now time for arguably the most important part of this lap. Going through turn 15, I had such a good run, and the delta reflected exactly that. And now all I had to do was maintain a 7/10 gain going through the final corner, and I would be absolutely delighted with this bit of progress. And I did just that. In the end, I made slightly under 7/10 worth of progress, but I still made a huge jump, and I was now into the top 40% in the world. And here is the 150th lap of this challenge. Even though I only made one bit of progress in this stint, I was still absolutely delighted with my performance. However, I also knew that this lap was going to be so difficult to beat. And to be honest, I was pretty much spot on about this. Unfortunately, between lap 150 and 200, I did not set a single improvement. So throughout this stint, for some reason, whenever I had a chance of making an improvement, I just seemed to bottle it. I mean, I cannot explain how frustrating this was, especially after I just drove off the track when I was positive to the delta after turn 1. Anyway, this is the end of my 4th stint, and I was just absolutely desperate to get onto the next 50 laps where I knew that it would be better and I would make some progress. And 18 laps into the next stint, I felt like this was an opportunity to finally make an improvement. Coming into the chicane, I was just over a tenth up to the delta, which I would have maintained on the exit of the corner if I didn't end up running along the grass. And this was just so frustrating because it felt like I still could not get out of my bottle drop mentality. However, the lap was not over just yet, but I did have to somehow find over 3 tenths to make any sort of improvement. So as we returned to normal racing speed on this lap, I had pretty much clawed back all of the time that I'd lost, and going through the final corner, I really prioritised the exit. And luckily for me, this worked out absolutely perfectly. I finished the lap with just under a tenth of a second worth of progress, which is nothing in terms of lap time. However, mentally, this is huge. I now had my confidence back, and I was certain that I could keep making progress, as this lap was far from perfect. And only 8 laps later, I was really carrying some momentum, because we're coming into turn 6 with a very slight gain to the delta, and going through here, I found even more time. However, this would not compare to the exit of turn 7, because this brought me to over 1.5 tenths up, which I should have maintained on the exit of the chicane. But it is a well-known fact that I am a complete idiot, and I ran along the grass again. Fortunately for me though, because I made the same mistake on my previous personal best going through this section of corners, I actually maintained my improvement all the way up to the final 2 corners on this lap. So going through the penultimate corner, once again I actually lost a bit of time, which was not ideal, especially considering I was being an idiot once again, and I really should have prioritised the exit. And then going through the final corner, unsurprisingly, I couldn't quite match my fantastic run from the previous personal best. However, on this lap, I had still made a tenth worth of progress. I was now just so desperate to make up for my mistake at the chicane, and I was not done yet on this stint. So if you haven't put 2 and 2 together, I'm showing you this lap as I'm about to make yet another improvement, and coming into the chicane, I was only a tenth down. However, I absolutely nailed those 2 corners, and the corners that came after them, I didn't have any grass on my tyres, which gave me so much more grip and unsurprisingly even more lap time. And I maintained the 2/10 gain that I'd created all the way to the end of the lap, and I was now in the top 30% in the world for the first time. And here is lap 250 of 500. I was now officially halfway through the challenge, and to be honest, I knew that this challenge was going to be as difficult as I thought that it was going to be. So it took me 37 laps to get to my first improvement on the 6th stint. However, on lap 287, I was coming into the chicane a tenth down to the delta. And I took the chicane perfectly. I left these 2 corners 700ths of a second up, and this time, going through the corners after the chicane, I actually hit the apex, which, as you can imagine, helped me make so much progress. However, it was about to go all wrong for me again. Through turn 14, I was way too eager on throttle, which meant that to not invalidate, I had to brake, and coming into turn 15, I'd lost all of the progress that I had previously made. Sadly, apart from a good final corner, I barely made any progress on this lap, so I was desperate to not end this stint on a negative. And we're now on to lap 44 of this stint, and I was 2 tenths down coming into turn 13. Going through this vital corner, I had such a good run, which led me to being a tenth up. But it was now time to engage in some dodgy driving. Coming into turn 14, I just broke way too late, which meant that I had to run far off track to not invalidate, which worked out perfectly. And as always, going through the penultimate corner, I prioritised the exit, which led to me gaining even more time. This could be huge. Next up was the final corner, and even though I had a slight wobble going through the turn, I still gained some more time, and I was now just 1% away from the top 20% in the world. And here is lap 300 of 500. I was now officially 60% of the way through the challenge, and I had to find 16% in terms of the leaderboard to complete my overall goal. So to be honest, the stint between lap 300 and 350 was a bit of an odd one, because the lap you're looking at now is the only bit of progress that I made. Coming into turn 14, I actually took the corner properly this time, which brought me back to almost a tenth up, and after this, going through the second to last corner, I had such a good run. However, I knew to complete this lap, I just had to prioritize the exit of the final corner, and thankfully I did just that. It worked out perfectly. I made a 1.8 tenth improvement on this lap and made 4% in terms of the leaderboard, which is huge at this stage in the challenge. And here is lap 350 of this challenge. I was improving at a rate that would mean that I would be in the top 5% in the world. However, I just did not know if I really had the ability to do that. And as it always is for the later stages of these challenges, it takes me most of the stint to get up to speed. However, on lap 379, I made my first improvement, but it would only keep me in the top 17% in the world, so I was so ready to push on for the next 20 laps. And we're now coming on to probably the weirdest ever lap that I've set in a 500 lap challenge. But first up was the chicane, and I had such a good couple of corners, which brought me to just under 2 tenths of a second up, but sadly I had lost half of this by the time we reached the final corner. However, this is where this lap gets weird. Going through the final corner on the exit, I slightly went off track, and I knew that I would invalidate if I rejoined illegally. So I tried crossing the finish line on the grass to try my luck. However, fairly, the previous lap was invalidated, so I just restarted this lap and thought that I was going to keep on going with my stint. That was until this happened. I had somehow managed to glitch the game and I was now into the top 16% in the world, which I completely did not deserve. And with 11 laps to go of the first 400, I was about to set another improvement. Going through turn 2, I got absolutely fantastic rotation and traction, which led to me being half a tenth up coming into the next braking zone at turn 6. Sadly though, going through turn 6, I lost all of this progress and more, so for the next few corners, I had to desperately try and get back to equal to my delta. And that is exactly what I did. Going through turn 7, I gained a little bit of time, and then going through the 2 corners of the chicane, I managed to bring the delta back to equal. And it's now time for the 4 corners between turn 10 and turn 14, and I just had such a good run going through here. I gained a full tenth of a second, which I was absolutely desperate to maintain. So to be honest, looking back, I've got absolutely no idea how I lost time going through the 3rd and final corner, because I managed to lose about half a tenth. However, looking back, I actually think I had a pretty good run. After this, going through turn 15, I had such a good exit, which meant that I made up for my previous corner, and coming into the final corner, I could potentially improve by a tenth of a second. And I did even more than that. I gained another 200ths of a second, which in total was worth 1.2 tenths, and I was now into the top 13% in the world with 110 laps left to go. And here is lap 400 of this challenge. I now had 100 laps to gain 8% in the world, and there were 3 ways that this challenge was going to go. So I was either going to consistently set good laps here and there and eventually make a small bit of progress that pushes me past the 5% mark, set some improvements but not enough to actually complete this challenge and make me fail a 500 lap challenge for the first time ever, or I would set an absolutely magical lap that would gain me multiple tenths of a second and by pure chance set a lap time in the top 5% in the world.
When she was just a girl, she expected the world, but it flew away from her reach, so she ran away in her sleep. Dreamed of paradise, every time she closed her eyes. When she was just a girl, she expected the world, but it flew away from her reach, and the bullets catching her teeth. Life goes on.
This is it. This is the lap of the weekend.
It's the butterfly, every tear a waterfall. In the night, the stormy night, she closed her eyes. In the night, the stormy night, away she flies. And dream of
Oh my word, I set this lap time literally 5 minutes ago and honestly I am still in shock. On lap 426 I had my miracle lap. I set a lap time that made me improve by 6 tenths of a second and I scraped into the top 5% in the world. I'll be honest, at the time of voice recording this I haven't even driven the next 75 laps of this challenge, but I can guarantee that I did not improve on this lap. And the 450th and 500th lap of this challenge should be playing in the background. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe and I will see you all next week.